Hello, True Health Seeker. I have a very exciting announcement. I have spent over a year, I've spent about 14 months collecting all of my information that I use with my clients for ending anxiety, and I created an online program. I'm very excited about it. We just launched it. And for you, for free, I have a webinar where I teach you 2 powerful mind tricks for removing anxiety, ending worry, and controlling fear so it stops controlling you and your life. In my free webinar, you will learn what causes anxiety and how to stop it, the science behind the mind-body connection, overcoming fear of public speaking, getting unstuck, ending that fear of things not working out, ending procrastination and overwhelm, and feeling excited, grounded, and calm instead of fear and worry. I have so much to teach you in my free webinar, and I'm really excited for you to come check it out. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar. That's freeyouranxiety.com/webinar, or look in the show notes of today's podcast and you'll see the link there so you can jump into the webinar and learn all these wonderful, powerful tools that will end your anxiety and create excitement and happiness instead. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar and sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next live webinar. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 214. I am so excited for today's guest. We have such a wonderful, wonderful woman with us today, a very inspirational author, Amy Newmark. I am thrilled to have you here. When I saw that you were going to be on the show, I just knew the listeners were going to love hearing your stories. Amy Newmark, of course, is the author and editor-in-chief of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And since 2008, she has published over 133 new books. Of course, most of them national bestsellers. I grew up on Chicken Soup for the Soul. And just in my teenage years and my teenage angst, these books helped me so much. And in my 20s, and when I found out I was pregnant, I bought for my mother-in-law, I bought her chicken soup for the grandma's soul for Christmas. And she was a retired librarian, and she said to me, I remember all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books being the most popular books in the library. And I thought that was really cool. So Amy, you have touched my life and so many of our lives in a beautiful way. And I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Well, thank you. I can't take credit for some of those early books. We bought the company from its founders, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, in 2008, so almost 10 years ago. And we've carried on with the same legacy, putting 101 stories from just regular, real people in every book. And the format continues to be incredibly popular and inspirational and compelling. And I know we've helped a lot of people in their lives. And I have to say that these books have changed my own life as well.
Now, some people would say, what is Amy Newmark doing on a health podcast? and what I keep saying to the listeners is that health is not just physical. If we only focused on physical health, we'd be missing out on a really big chunk of the pie, because health is emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic, and physical. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of every aspect of our life. It has to do with our health. So when we find inspiration, and when we find meaning, and when we find purpose, and when we find motivation, and when we learn from other people's stories, we can shape our life. And that is learning how to transform our lives to have true health. And so what you do, Amy, although you're not directly a healthcare provider, you are providing us with the nourishment. And that's essentially what the name of the book series is Chicken Soup for the Soul, because it is that nourishment that helps us to achieve true health in our life, and that holistic happiness that we're looking for.
I don't think you can be healthy if you're not happy, if you haven't reduced your stress levels, if you haven't found a way to make your life productive and purposeful. Because if you don't have those things going for you, it will definitely affect your health. It's been proven over and over again by the medical establishment that stress and unhappiness degrades your health.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I can't believe how much stress, how many diseases stress causes. I've had clients, I also do health coaching. I've had clients say to me, well, I don't feel stress. And we think that stress is an emotion like anger or happiness, that we should feel it. Stress is something that is like this pressure upon us that wears away at every system in our body until all of a sudden we just snap. And we need to rewind and go back and take care of ourselves before we go down that path. We need to really figure out how to manage it on a daily basis. And whether it's sitting down and reading a book for 20 minutes, putting your feet up and taking a deep breath and taking some time for ourselves, especially these motivational and inspirational stories that have us see our life in a different light. And I think that that's a beautiful thing that your books provide. I'd love to get into a bit of your story. What led you and your husband to purchase the Chicken Soup for the Soul company, and continue providing this wonderful service of all these books? What led up to your in your life that led up to you wanting to do that?
Well, I guess since we're talking about medicine and health, I would have to say it was total insanity because we made the insane we made the insane move of buying a publishing company in April 2008 at the beginning of the deepest recession we have had since the Great Depression of 1929. And I think the recession was even worse in the publishing industry. I mean, you had Borders go out of business. You had hundreds of independent bookstores in the US and Canada close. You had Barnes and Noble cut the number of stores. You had all of the big box stores cut the number of feet of shelf space devoted to selling books. And there we were with our brand new book company, having no idea what we were doing. But how did we get into it? We got into it because we came from the technology side of business and from content, because technology is really about delivering content, right? And we saw this content company available, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and it stood for everything that we believed in. And we realized that we could take this company beyond the bookshelves, right? And we could take it into a lot of other areas in people's lives, because Chicken Soup for the Soul is about storytelling, storytelling that improves people's lives. And storytelling is not confined to the written page anymore.
What other means besides the physical books? You talk about these different taking it into the technology world, basically taking Chicken Soup for the Soul into the age of information. What other ways can people access your content? So I know you have a great podcast. I definitely want listeners to check out your podcast. I listening to an episode, I could not believe how many wonderful tidbits of information and stories and motivation was cram packed into 7 minutes. I looked at the clock. I said, "There's no way that was 7 minutes." You told two inspiring stories that had me crying, and a quote, and some really great life tips, and it was all less than 10 minutes. I thought this is a really powerful podcast. So I definitely want listeners to check it out. Of course, they can go to chickensoup.com, and in the menu there it says podcast. So besides physical books and your podcast, what other ways can people gain the inspiration from Chicken Soup for the Soul?
So we have a daily email which goes out to hundreds of thousands of people, where we send them a free Chicken Soup for the Soul story every day. We have our website where they can go and read stories online. They can buy a subscription even, and have, unlimited access to stories online. They can also watch our television shows. They can go to our subsidiary, aplus.com, and see all kinds of inspirational articles and videos. Aplus.com is a positive journalism website that we own in conjunction with Ashton Kutcher. And we and Ashton believe very much in the power of positive journalism. And that website is great. Every day you'll go there, you'll find all kinds of videos. I mean, you could just spend all day watching the videos and reading the stories. And so there's a lot going on with us. We just bought a company called Screen Media, which has free apps for watching movies. You can download an app called Popcorn Flix, Flix, Popcorn Flix, and you get to watch movies for free. I mean, we have so many different ways now that we spread great stories through not only books, but also through the internet and on every size screen that there is.
And so that positive website, the positive news website, it's aplus.com.
Yeah, so it's aplus.com.
I have for years been looking for that. I'm so excited that you just said that because I go to, google.news.com and or news.google.com, I go to the, Google's news, right? Or I go to the trending in Facebook and I see the kind of the news that's trending there. And I always leave completely depressed. Like I want to be plugged into the world, but I don't want the fear mongering that mainstream media kind of like clickbait fear mongering that I keep getting. And I think it's so unhealthy for us to constantly be bombarded with, this child was murdered and this child died. And this the second I became a parent, all of a sudden it was like children were dying everywhere in all the news stories. And I want to see where children are being, nurtured and loved and succeeding. And those are the kind of stories I want to plug into. Not that, it's not going to make the what's happening out there change, but if I can shift my internal state, then I can keep going and being this, trying to be a positive person and helping other people be positive, and we can hopefully spread that, right? So it's like, do we want to spread negativity or do we want to spread, positivity? And I've been looking for and searching for some kind of news outlet that I could plug into that was only about positivity and inspiration and success. I remember, growing up in Canada, there was this local news station that every day they had one news piece of something positive. And I thought I would live for that. I would only watch the news for that, like one inspirational story. I didn't care about the rest of the stuff. And I think that if given a chance, we as a society would be motivated by more of focusing more on these positive stories than being constantly fearmongered. So I'm very excited. aplus.com. That's definitely going to be in the show notes of the podcast for the listeners to check out. I love what Ashton Kutcher does, and that he's also involved in software that helps to combat human trafficking. So I've been very
Hmm.
inspired by what he does. I think that's really cool that you guys partnered up.
Yeah, we
Wonderful.
did. So aplus.com, you've probably actually read their articles or seen their videos because they go viral all the time. And so you may have seen something that somebody passed along on Facebook or that some other news organization is showing. And what you didn't know was that it's actually an A plus story or an A plus video. So I agree with you also with what you said about how people are really seeking some positive news now. And we saw that very much at Chicken Soup for the Soul in the last couple of years. We put out a book in February of 2017 called Chicken Soup for the Soul Random Acts of Kindness.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, this book went crazy. It was a huge bestseller for us. We were constantly running out of it and having to do emergency reprints. It's still selling strong, and it's been out for almost a year now. And it's 101 stories about people doing acts of kindness for strangers. And it revives your hope in humanity, and it shows you that almost everybody is a good person, and so much of the news only covers bad people or bad actions by
Exactly.
people. And yet, the fact is that people inherently want to be good. They want to look out for each other. They want to care for each other. People feel good when they do something good for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a natural human impulse to do good things for other people. It's like a physiological, emotional need that we have. We want to help other people. The cool thing about all of the stories that we put out about random acts of kindness is that it actually tells people that they're allowed to do those things. Because
Mm.
how many times have you thought about doing something nice for someone and then you thought, oh, well, wait, maybe I shouldn't, or maybe they would think I was interfering, or is that weird? And so you don't do it. And what these stories tell you is that it is okay to do those things. And We actually need permission to do these things because I don't know about you, but I've had times when I have failed to do something nice for someone. And then 5 minutes later, I've said, I can't believe I didn't follow my impulse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember those times when I didn't do that nice thing, and it's bugging me now that I didn't do it. And so I know after we started collecting all of these stories, and we also have been doing a lot of stories on one of our television shows, which is called Hidden Heroes, about people doing acts of kindness for strangers. I started doing more because I felt like I had permission. Like I remember one day I was in a CVS and there's like a halfway house for people in the CVS parking lot where our office is over a CVS, and so we're down there all the time, and we see the people who go to this halfway house who are mentally troubled or mentally ill people, and there was a couple of them in the store in front of me, and one of them was trying to buy toenail clippers, and he didn't have, a dollar that he needed or whatever. And there was this line. And so I thought, I'm allowed to help him because I've been watching our Hidden Heroes television show and I know I'm allowed to help him. And so I just stepped out of the line and gave the cashier what she needed so that he could go on his way, and then got back, into my place in line, and we were able to finally move forward again. And, for $1 or $2, whatever it cost me, I felt really good, and it just kept things going, and there was nothing wrong with doing it. But I really feel like a lot of us, we stifle that impulse because we think that somehow there's something wrong with doing that. Like the guy's not going to like it. He's going to
Mm-hmm.
get mad at us for doing it, or people were going to think we're weird, or somebody's going to think we were trying to cut the line or whatever. But it was all good. I gave him the money. His friend said, "Oh, thank you very much." 1, 2, 3, they were done. And yeah, so I feel I'm being encouraged to do more of these things by being exposed to these stories.
I love it. It reminded me of a time I was on a road trip with my husband, and it was early in the morning, sometime in some place in Northern California, and I was in a line at a convenience store while we were filling up gas, and I overheard this guy talking to the cashier. It was a small town, everyone knows each other kind of feeling, and it sounded like the guy had just gotten his job back. He had just gotten out of a really rough patch in his life. He was just starting work. He was about to drive to work, and he has like a coffee and some kind of breakfast sandwich to buy, and he didn't have enough change. And I just, without hesitation, I just went up and said, you know what, it's on me, because I overheard him, like he was very positive, but it just sounded like he had really been through a rough patch. And I was on a high for hours. My husband and I talked about it. We were so excited. We're like, hey, this guy needed some help, and we helped him, and he was a total stranger. This was so much fun. And as we're driving down the highway for hours, we kind of just felt like we're on this high. I'm sure this guy does not remember this. This is like, maybe he does. But to us, I got way more out of helping this person. I than that, $5 or $10 that I spent on him. I was on top of the world for hours. I heard once from someone that you should always have some walking money with you, so that if you run into someone who needs help, that you just, without any hesitation, you just help that person, and you don't think to yourself, oh, they're going to buy drugs or they're going to buy alcohol. Just be abundance in the universe, and then get, like, feel that high, because for hours you'll feel great because you got to touch someone's life. And it is, I think you're so right that we need to recognize that this is okay, that this behavior is okay. We come from a tribal system, we how we survived as humans for tens of hundreds of thousands of years was to be part of the tribe and to help each other. Children were raised in the village, right? It wasn't this what it is now. It's very sterile. Our society is we're cut off from our neighbors. We're cut off from each
I
other.
agree. We walk
And
around in a bubble. There's a little
right.
bubble around us. So we had a story about a woman who had read a story about a pastor in Toronto who had had that walking around money on him. And he he decided one day to put 20 Canadian dollars in his pocket and just give it out to anybody who needed it all day long, like a few dollars at a time. And over the course of a whole day, he gave money to whoever he felt like giving money to, and it didn't add up even to the $20. And so this woman, she was from Canada. She remembered this. She was on vacation in Salt Lake City, and I actually told her story in our latest book, Chicken Soup for the Soul: Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. So she was in Salt Lake City. She was trying to get into a certain church or cathedral, and the door was locked, but she could get into the vestibule, go in one set of doors, but then she found the second set of doors was locked, but there was a homeless man lying there sleeping. So she walks in, she sees the homeless man, the door's locked, she scurries away, and then he says, wait a minute, wait a minute. And she talks to him because she's thinking about this pastor in Toronto and how you should help these people because they're not drug addicts necessarily. They're just down on their luck. And she starts talking to the guy, and she realizes he needs breakfast, and she has no American cash on her, but she has a McDonald's gift card. So she says to him, I have this McDonald's gift card. He tells her the church isn't going to open for an hour. She says, let's go to McDonald's and I will buy you some breakfast with this gift card that I have. So they go, and he says, well, you might as well sit with me because you got to wait an hour to go back to the church. So they sit there. She has coffee. And he says, I know Salt Lake City really well. How about if I act as your tour guide today? I don't have anything else to do. And she's thinking, oh, this is so weird. I should say no. And then she decides to step outside her comfort zone, make a human connection with this stranger for whom she's already bought breakfast. He gave her a tour of Salt Lake City for the next few hours. That was a fabulous tour. He knew everything. And so she got this fabulous tour from this homeless guy. It completely opened up her eyes. And this was all because she stepped outside her comfort zone. She treated the world like it's a village, right? And she made a connection with a fellow human being. It was really wonderful.
I love that. And I love you have an entire book dedicated to stepping outside your comfort zone. But I know that you have these two books that go hand in hand. It's perfect for January. It's perfect for all of us who are now kind of looking within and looking at the next, what do we want to accomplish in the next 12 months. I love January. I love that it's this time where we wipe the slate clean and go, okay, whatever happened in 2017, let's learn from it. And let's now apply all these learnings to 2018, and we get to choose what 2018 looks like. And this is the time, January is the time that we need that extra inspiration, that extra motivation, that extra push to push us outside of our comfort zone so that we can stop repeating the past, right? We want a new future, and this is what we got to do to get it. And so you've got these two books, these two Chicken Soup for the Soul books, Simply Happy, which you had published in 2016, and then you let me know that they go perfectly together because the last chapter of Simply Happy is sort of like the first chapter of Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. They go hand in
Exactly.
hand. So I'd love for you to share with us what is Simply Happy, and that process of reading that book and then jumping into Step Outside Your Comfort Zone, and why would those two books be perfect for people to read in January, or at least when the listener is hearing this, because any time is a good time to kind of rev up and kickstart our life and take our life to that next level that to help us achieve the goals we want.
Absolutely. Whenever you're listening to this podcast means that it's your time to be introspective and figure out what you want to do next because you're listening to this podcast. So, the Simply Happy book is basically a crash course in Chicken Soup for the Soul advice and wisdom. I took my life combined with having read tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 Chicken Soup for the Soul stories where I've taken in all of that information. It's like being a psychologist who reads case studies, except I'm reading these revealing personal stories from tens of thousands of people, which is a lot of case studies, and they're sharing the most emotional, meaningful anecdotes from their lives. So, all of this advice and wisdom that I have learned from people is compiled into one volume in Simply Happy. And the conclusion I came to at the end of Simply Happy, after going through all of these different self help steps, which I'll go over with you today, was that once you've created this foundation where you're happy, then you're ready to step outside your comfort zone and stand on this great foundation and now open up your world, broaden your world, and try new things, overcome your fears, try those new scary things that will make you proud when you do them. So that's why I love the idea of reading Simply Happy, implementing some of these incredibly easy to implement tips, and then moving on from there to step outside your comfort zone.
I love what you just said, that will make you, the new scary things you try that will make you proud of
Oh,
yourself when
yeah.
you do them. I think a lot of the times we get stuck in the fear of not stepping out, like the fear of what might happen. And we kind of go, okay, well, right here is safe, right? And so doing this new thing is unsafe because it's the unknown. Um, and there's no positive motivation to get to the other side, right? Because there's only that sort of, there's carrot and the stick, right? So there's only that stick that we're kind of turning away from, that fear, or that well, there's a lot of unknowns that could happen, a lot of really negative things that could happen, so I'm better off not doing it. But if we put this really big carrot on the other side going, you are going to feel so amazing regardless of how the outcome happens, the fact that you did it, you're going to feel very proud of yourself for stepping out. So let's say it's going doing, dance classes, and you were born with two left feet, and you're just going to trip over yourself and make a fool of yourself, and you're afraid of people judging you, and maybe kids laughed at you as when you're at the high school dance, and now it's years later, and that fear of stepping out has kept you stuck. But now think of how proud you'll feel after you do it. And hey, that is it's such a powerful thing to move towards. So instead of focusing on the fear of what might go wrong, focus on how amazing it's going to feel because you did it. So I love that you point that out and make that the emphasis of focusing on that while you step outside your comfort zone.
Well, yeah, and I've spent my whole life stepping outside my comfort zone and doing scary things. And even before I left Wall Street and business and technology and all of the things I used to do that don't seem chicken soupy at all. And, before I became that nice chicken soup for the soul lady, even back then, I was always doing these new scary things. There was a quote that I loved even before I became that nice chicken soup for the soul lady who likes inspirational quotes. And this quote is by a man named John Shedd. And he said, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for."
Mm.
And I've always loved that quote. And I've always kind of pushed the edge of the envelope and, done new things, done things you weren't supposed to be able to do, et cetera. So, yeah. And certainly becoming the publisher of Chicken Soup for the Soul after a career on Wall Street and in technology and business, that was certainly a big step outside my comfort zone. So I am very excited about the Step Outside Your Comfort Zone book. And I mean, you could do something as little as trying a food that you thought you hated. And now you force yourself to try it again. You say, "Oh, it's not so bad. Now I have a new food in my life." Or you try it and you still hate it, but you give yourself a little pat on the back for having tried it. So you could do something as small as that. You could go up one little step and say, go try shopping at a new grocery store. Go to one where you don't know how the aisles are laid out. Force yourself, right? Force yourself to go to a new store. Like, don't just sit there in your little rut, go to the same store because my husband and I are constantly forcing ourselves to go to new grocery stores where we have to be exposed to new foods, see new things. So those are little things you can do. You can do slightly bigger things like wear some new kind of clothing that you haven't worn before. We had a story in Step Outside Your Comfort Zone from a woman who had always admired women who wore long skirts just for like everyday wear, just around in town or wherever. And she had studied them and she saw they seemed to wear a different style of jewelry and they wore different shoes. And finally, she got her courage up and she bought this long skirt and she she ran a store in her town, and one day she wore the skirt and she went out and went to the bank, and nobody said anything. And so she started changing her clothes, and before she knew it, she was driving a sports car and had a whole new life. Because usually when you step outside your comfort zone in some little way, it emboldens you, and then you do another thing and you do another thing, and the things get bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden you have this new exciting life and you are so pleased with yourself. You're doing all these great things. We had a story from one woman. She decided, I don't remember what the motivation was, but somehow one year she decided, as summer was approaching, that this was going to be her summer of yes. And she was just going to say yes to anything that anybody suggested. So if they said to her, let's go to an outdoor concert, and normally she would have said, no, it's going to be hot, it might rain, whatever, she would say yes. Somebody said, let's go compete in a 5K. She said yes. Somebody said, let's go to a science fiction convention, something this woman would never do. She said yes. She did everything. It was her summer of yes. And her friends started to be so impressed, and they started to do the same thing because they saw her saying yes to everything and having such a stimulating summer. Well, that summer of yes led to her feeling so much more empowered that she went back to college and finished her college degree. She got a new job that was better for her, and she got something published. So her life was transformed because she made this simple decision to have a policy of saying yes for one season, and then that turned into a permanent policy. Saying yes really does change your life, and it really does make you feel great about yourself.
I love that, and we learn so much when we read stories. It's how our brain works. You know, that's how before the age of writing, we were able to pass knowledge down from generation to generation through stories, and so I love that your medium is this very gentle, organic, and easy way to process information, so that I could listen to a story, or read a story, or watch a story, because you have all these wonderful mediums, and that I could then see where that applies to my life without someone just standing there saying, "Okay, Ashley, you're gonna say yes to everything now." You know,
Oh yeah.
it's very.
Reading a dry essay, like even my book Simply Happy, which is, like a true self-help book, it's all based on telling stories, because that is how we really learn the best, is through storytelling, and it's how mankind has passed down wisdom and culture and advice around the campfire, right? For hundreds of thousands of years. Storytelling absolutely works the best for getting into our heads, because I think you learn best when you feel the emotion. So, like, I tell people a lot about my biggest step outside my comfort zone experience. And I tell the story to, audiences when I'm doing public speaking, and I hear them gasp, but I know it's getting into their heads. And maybe they won't do the same thing, but they'll go do something different,
Mhm.
because, yeah, it really, really helps to hear the real stories from people.
Absolutely, because you can really put yourself in their shoes. Now, I was really impressed to learn about your earlier life, and your travels through Brazil, and where stories played a big role there. Can you share a bit about your early life?
That Yeah, it's so funny because when we bought Chicken Soup for the Soul and I officially became publisher for, what I would consider to be the world's favorite storyteller, and I embarked on this new career of collecting stories from regular people and compiling them and really getting to know people through these stories. I hadn't had a resume in a really long time because I had been running my own businesses and doing my own thing. And then I needed to create a resume, just to have a bio for publicity purposes for Chicken Soup for the Soul. So I sat down to write a resume, started writing about Brazil because I did that when I was in college. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, I'm just doing what I did when I was 20. I mean, I was 50 then. And I said, this is what I did 30 years ago. So when I was in college, I majored in Portuguese. When I was applying to college, my father took me to Brazil. He was doing a lot of business in Brazil, and at that time Brazil was an economic miracle. It was a very exciting country, in many ways similar to the United States, and I felt very comfortable there. And he said, "You know, you love languages," because my senior year of high school, I took French, German, Latin, and English. That was
Wow.
all I took. I was done with math and science by that point, and he said, why don't you during your, admissions interviews talk about how you want to take Portuguese and talk about Brazil because it will make you sound really interesting." So I did that in my admissions interviews. And then I ended up getting into Harvard, and Harvard did have two professors who taught Portuguese. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to take Portuguese. Why not? And then I became a Portuguese major, but I was the only Portuguese major in the whole university. And so, yeah, because they had two professors, but who was going to take Portuguese? Like you could speak it in just a few places, like Portugal, Brazil, Macau, very few places. So I went to Brazil. I did a semester abroad. At that time, this was 1978. Harvard didn't even have study abroad available because they felt that nothing could be better than staying at Harvard, which was pretty elitist and snooty of them. So I had to, like, well, this was again like stepping outside your comfort zone. I had to petition this august assemblage of deans of Harvard and make my case for why I should be allowed to do a semester abroad. And luckily they said yes, and off I went. So in Brazil, I had to do research for my thesis, and I decided to research this popular form of storytelling in the northeast of Brazil, which was this really impoverished area. It's still really impoverished. It's not where tourists go at all. And they had these cheap little printed booklets there called folhetos, and they would sell them at these little market stands, and they were really inexpensive, like maybe today's equivalent of dollar books or something. And um, and people could buy them for a few coins, and this was the literature of the common people, the poor people. And so I started meeting all of the different writers of these folhetos and interviewing all of them. And I traveled around the northeast of Brazil meeting these people. And it was truly a case of stepping outside your comfort zone because I was 20 years old. I had blonde hair down to my waist, very pale skin, blue eyes. I was completely aberrational there. I mean, they had never seen anybody who looked like me. And I mean, I'd go into like a little village, and like 50 people would be standing around me in a circle, just staring at me because I was just such a freak to them. I mean, I was a freak, this pale freak, and my hair was so blonde from the sun, it was like white from the sun. So I wrote about that and step outside your comfort zone, but because it really taught me a lot about like resilience and finding strength within me to do weird things because I was only 20 when I was doing this. But anyway, when I was sitting down to write my resume 30 years later, I said, "Oh my gosh, I spent 3 months in Brazil collecting stories from the people, and now I'm doing it again, but now I get to use the internet." So a lot has changed in 30 years. But yeah, it is funny how life is so circular that I'm back to doing what I did 30 years ago.
That's amazing. I imagine every day your inbox is flooded with these stories that make you cry, that move you to tears, that inspire you. Um, how can you explain the process of how you guys? I'm sure it's not just you that sit there reading them. You'd be going through Kleenex like crazy. But what's the process? So if someone wants to submit their story to Chicken Soup for the Soul, what does it look like to be a contributing author?
So we are really wonderful to our writers. I think that we pay the highest amount to freelancers of any publisher of compilation books. And we also don't take their copyright. We let them maintain ownership of their story. We just get the right to publish it in our books. And we treat them really well in terms of showing them every edit that we've made and making sure they're okay with our edits, because sometimes we do quite a bit of editing. But it's super easy to submit stories to us. What you do is you go to our website, chickensoup.com, and then if you scroll down to the bottom of our homepage, you'll see you can click on Submit Your Story. And when you go there, you'll find three things. You'll find a really good discussion of what we're looking for in a story. So, some really excellent writing guidelines, which you can use for our stories, but just in your general life as a writer. Then you'll find a list of the books that we're collecting for at the moment. Right now, there are 5 books we're collecting for. And then you'll also find a page that you fill in to submit your story. So you fill in, your contact information, and there's this little tiny box that looks like it will hold, 5 lines of your story, but it's magical. You take your Word document that could be 1,200 words, and you just paste it into that box, and that little tiny box will take your entire Word document and put it into our database, and then we will read your story. And the way we do that is we'll get 5 or 6,000 stories submitted for a book, and we'll only publish 101 of those stories in each book. But we'll read your story thinking about some of the other books we have coming up also. So if you don't make it in that book, you might hear from us in 3 months, in 12 months, in 2 years for another book that we're working on. And a lot of people tell us that even if their stories don't get in, because it is hard to get in, to be one of 101 out of 5,000 submissions, they still say that just the act of writing their story is so good for them. And they'll show their story to family members. It's a way of expressing gratitude to family members or friends. It's a way of organizing their thoughts. They'll write us thank you letters and say, "You didn't take my story, but I want to thank you for making me write it." So anyway, that's how people get into our books. And then how do we read them? Well, we do have a team of editors now. We all discuss what we're looking for, and then they dive into those thousands of stories and they read every single one. And then they grade them, they write their comments, and then I'll see several hundred finalists for those 101 spots. And yes, I do cry when I'm reading the stories, and I laugh out loud, and I turn to my husband and I say, "You've got to hear this one." And I mean, I actually talked about this in the Simply Happy book, because when we were buying the company back in 2008, I read our past books. So I read about 100 of our 150 or so past Chicken Soup for the Soul books, the ones that were published prior to 2008. And I spent 3 months reading 100 books. And I was crying so much that I had to actually start replacing my contact lenses more often, because I was ruining them with salt from my
gosh.
tears. But it was an amazing experience. That was my crash course in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Advice and Wisdom. And I talk about that in the Simply Happy book, and how people said to me after I had read those 10,000 old stories and then started reading, tens of thousands of new ones as well. People said to me that I was different. And my friends would say to me things like, "You're so nice now." I know, right? Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure how to take that. But I do think I am probably nicer now. And I am certainly more grounded and way less judgmental, because now that I have seen all these amazing people who are so much more amazing than I could ever hope to be, these incredible giving people who, report on what they do, or people who report on acts of kindness from other people. But I'm exposed to all these incredible people. I am also exposed to how lucky I am to have the life that I have when I look through what other people go through. And so I'm way more grateful for my own life and the people in it. I'm way less judgmental. I'm so much more forgiving. I've learned so much about the power of forgiveness from working on all of these books. And forgiveness is an unbelievable tool that we have in our toolkits for making our lives better. And I've just learned so much. So it's been an incredible transformative experience for me. And I tried to capture it and pass on the essence of it to everybody in the Simply Happy book because I want to share this incredible experience with as many people as possible.
I love that you brought up the changes that took place inside you after reading 100 of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I imagine that it was the act of doing that was very like the opposite of stress. You were laughing, you were inspired, you were moved. Your body was not in the sympathetic nervous system response, that the part of the autonomic nervous system responsible for fight or flight. You were in the parasympathetic nervous system response, the part of the nervous system that's responsible for rest and digest, for healing, sends all of our resources to cleaning up and healing the body and detoxifying and creating healthy digestion. And when we're in stress, that all the whole system gets shut down to only divert energy to immediate survival. And so people who are in the sympathetic nervous system response for too long, so basically when they're in that stress mode, that survival mode for too long, and you're in survival mode when you're worried about paying the bills.
Hmm.
If you're thinking about something that you feel anxiety for, or you feel fear, or you're afraid, or you're worried, or any little worried thoughts that are racing through your head, you are not, your body is not diverting resources to heal and create healthy tissue. It's diverting your resources to immediate survival, to adrenaline, to that fight or flight or freeze response. And
Okay, so that makes total sense because if you think about it, sitting on my couch for 3 months reading 100 Chicken Soup for the Soul books, that whole time I was open and receiving.
mhm,
Exactly. And now what you have said is so interesting because it has explained to me how I have done this job for 10 years now without my head exploding
mhm,
because this is the hardest job I've ever done in my life. I work 7 days a week. I work, 14 hours a day. I work nonstop and I have colleagues who do the same. I mean, two of my colleagues came to us from the original Chicken Soup for the Soul organization. So they've been doing this even longer than I have and they're happy and content and they work 7 days a week too. And I just realized it's because we spend so much of our time reading the stories and being open and receiving that it dramatically reduces our stress level, even though we're performing the work of an army and there are only about 10 of us.
yes. Now, is there any, you should just look at, just observe, are there any staff that don't read the stories, that don't plug into the product, the Chicken Soup for the Soul products, right? All the motivational and inspirational stories. And what's their health like versus those who do on a regular basis read all these stories coming in, either the raw ones or the ones that get published. Either way, they're both, they're plugging into motivational stories. I would bet you that the staff members who are working just as hard, right? All the staff members are working equally as hard, but those who are plugging into the Chicken Soup for the Soul stories because their job requires them to are happier and healthier than those that don't. Because that the stress response, so the when we think of the body is connected directly to the mind, right? So you could watch a zombie movie and you're safe because you're in your living room sitting on your couch. It's very safe, and yet the zombie comes running towards the main character and your palms start sweating, your heart starts pounding, and you just want to like turn off the TV or fast forward it. And your body is reacting. So your heart's pounding, your palms are sweating, your body's reacting. Or maybe you start breathing heavier, shallow, or if the zombie jumps out around the corner. I've actually seen my husband literally lift off the couch. He was so startled. So the body reacts as though it's real. And so when that's the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight response. And when we focus on every day thinking about all these little negative thoughts, looking at the negative news, right? This is why I love aplus.com so much, because when we focus on the negativity, the body is always listening to our thoughts. And so the more we focus on the negative, the more the body takes it as we are in survival mode, our life is being threatened. So when I read a
Hmm.
story on the news about some other person being threatened or some, a parent losing their child, and I start crying for that parent, And I'm now telling my body that that's actually happening to me. And so my adrenaline, my cortisol goes up, and my body diverts all its energy away from healing and creating healthy tissue and just towards immediate survival. So taking a break and reading these stories that turn off that stress response and turn on the parasympathetic response of rest and digest, then the body can be given a chance to heal. And I think that's another reason why Chicken Soup for the Soul is so powerful. Because as long as we every day take some time to turn off that stress response, we turn on healing. And so you have practiced preventive medicine every day for 10 years because you have, basically taken your soup as medicine.
I think that you're right. When I think about it internally at the office, I remember one winter when everybody at the office got the flu. It just went through the whole office. And out of 20 people, only 2 people didn't get it. And I was one of those 2 people. And my husband is the CEO of Chicken Soup for the Soul. So you would think that if he gets it, I would get it, right? And I didn't even get it, even though he had it. And he's not reading our books. I am. And I'm reading all these stories that are coming in. So I think you're right. I think this job, stressful as it is, has contributed to better health for me.
That is so fascinating. I love it. I love it. It's very cool. So these two books, which I think is really a powerful way for our listeners to set their goals and kind of figure out what's in their blind spots, because that's my biggest thing is I love personal growth and development. I've been kind of plugged into personal growth my whole life. Even when I was a teenager, I was doing Landmark and just and reading the Celestine Prophecy at age 15, and I was like, oh, this is where it's at, learning about how to, and The Alchemist, all those earlier books that had me kind of open up my mind to that there was so much more out there, and I wanted to keep plugging into personal growth. But it's in our blind spot, and that's kind of this catch 22 is we don't know necessarily where to start, and we don't know what to clean up or what to look at or what to heal. um how do we know if we're in a comfort zone? Because we might live a pretty outrageous life. Even those who go skydiving might get in a funk. Like jumping out of a plane might be their comfort zone after a while. So how do we know we're in a comfort zone? And what's a good way? I love your example of start going to different grocery stores. But what are some good ways we can start to shake it up?
Well, I think first of all, you got to go inside your head and just see if there's anything that's holding you back. And what I find is that with very successful people, their biggest critic is inside their own heads, and you've got to
Mm.
first address that. So, and it doesn't take long. What the cool thing about a lot of these self-help tips that I've derived from all the Chicken Soup for the Soul stories is that these are things that only take 1 minute to implement because it's just a matter of tweaking your perspective. So, first, you have to look at yourself. Who's your biggest critic? I'm sure it's yourself because that little voice in your head really is your worst enemy. And so you got to start there because that is absolutely holding you back. If that negative little voice inside your own head is telling you, well, you're not really good enough, and it's doubting your abilities. I mean, one thing that I find is that a lot of people, especially women who tend to be very self-effacing, a lot of us have what is called imposter syndrome, where we're doing something as well as anybody could expect. And yet all of a sudden we say to ourselves, don't they know I have no idea what I'm doing? And right, I don't know if you've ever done that doing the podcast or any other new things that you've tried to do, but you're faking it till you make it. You
Mm-hmm.
do this thing or becoming a new mother. Oh my God, talk about imposter syndrome when they hand you that baby in the hospital, right? And they're handing you that baby and you're thinking, why are they giving me this baby to take home? Don't they know I'm probably going to kill this baby because I have no idea what I'm doing? I don't know how to give the child a bath. I don't know how to do anything. I'm completely incompetent. Isn't there a test? Right? So we always have imposter syndrome. So if you know that you have it and you say, wait a minute, people believe I can do this thing that I've just doubted I can do. They're handing me this baby, or they're handing me this new podcast, or they're handing me this new thing to do at work. Well, it's because they think I can do it. So, wait, this person who's an expert they think I can do it. So why am I doubting it? Oh, yeah, it's because my biggest critic is inside my own head. Well, once you just become self aware, you can quiet that little voice inside your own head. So that's the first thing you can do in January, New Year's resolution. Immediately think about who's telling you you can't do something. So now that's gone, right? Tweak, gone, right? That's your 1 second New Year's resolution that you have now accomplished, right? Now, another thing you can do, and this holds people back from trying to do new things, is they think they have to be perfect. And striving for perfection is a loser's game. Nobody can be perfect. All you can do is strive for excellence, and excellence is never perfection, it's just excellence. So I've been a perfectionist my whole life, but I have to tell you that when you are a book publisher, it is an incredibly humbling experience because we have 4 different people who proofread every book. And I'm telling you that there are typos that will not make themselves apparent until we have printed 50,000 copies of a book. And only after we have printed 50,000 copies of a book will the most ridiculous, obvious typo pop up and wave at us and say, "You're such an idiot. Look at me. I've been here all along." So I've also learned not to be so judgmental with other publishers. I mean, I used to get books out of the library. I'd be like marking the typos, I'd be defacing the library book and marking the typo and sending it back to the library. Um, but I was so offended by these typos. And now I've realized every book has typos. Every newspaper has typos. Every magazine has typos. They just hide. So you cannot strive for perfection. And if you strive for perfection, you will not do new things. And so I learned as a multitasking woman who was trying to be a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a colleague at work, a volunteer, that you couldn't do all of those things if you were trying to be perfect. Because if you tried to be 100%, you'd be trying to do one thing at 100%. And it was better to try to do 6 different things at, 90%. And probably my 90% was someone else's 99% anyway. So if I did 6 different things at 90%, what is that? 6 times 9 is 54. That's like 540 points that I got, right? Versus trying to do one thing at 100% where maybe I got to 99. So I got 540 points. Somebody else trying to do one thing got 99 points. So by giving up on perfection, I got to be a multitasker and do a lot of different things. So those are 2 things that you can do inside your head that take no time at all and will set you up to lead a more interesting life. So those are 2 things I talk about in the Simply Happy book. And then my feeling is that once you've gone inside your head and you've dealt with those things, the next thing you have to deal with is how you interact with other people now that you finish dealing with how you interact with yourself. And so we can talk about that if you want, because that's another thing you need to do on the step on the path towards stepping outside your comfort zone.
Absolutely. I think, especially since the whole political climate of the last few years, I feel that, and I don't know, it's just like observing Facebook. There's a lot of people at each other's throats. A lot of people have unfriended each other. It's pretty crazy out there. And I think that, like, I love what you said about how when we do these random acts of kindness, we realize that genuinely most people are kind-hearted, loving, good people, regardless of where they were born or where they come from or where the belief system. They genuinely are good people, and most people out there. And there's like one in I heard this quote once. There's only really 4 bad people in the world. They just get around a lot. and
Uh-huh.
and so, if we just think about it this way, like, everyone, regardless of their political affiliation or their ethnicity or their, socioeconomic status, they were born with the same feelings, with the same heart as you, and they want the same things as you. They want kindness and love and friendship and support, and they want community. And they want the, all of their basic needs to be met for themselves and their family, and they want it for you too. And so I love that book, that Random Act of Kindness, the Chicken Soup for the Soul Random Act of Kindness, helps people to see that there's more, we have more in common then we have differences, because I think that's a big message that we need right now. We need to come together more, and see that we're coming together more, because I think they're showing conflict over and over and over again because it sells, right? Because the fear mongering seems to sell in like as clickbait. But I think that they're in your like aplus.com, right? I think that we'll see that there are more and more good things happening if we focus on the good. And so I want to see people trusting other people more, and being kind to other strangers more. And so I love that you said that part of this, in your Simply Happy book, is how we relate to and treat others. So yes, I'd love for you to dive into that.
All right. So, one of the things that holds us back is having resentments and feeling bad about our interactions with other people. And what I guess for me it came naturally, but I think for some people you have to be taught this. But the moment you hear this, again, it's one of these 1 second tweaks in perspective, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, gee, my life just got a lot better. So here's how I have always conducted my life. I don't take things personally. So you walk into a store and the cashier is grumpy and you're not treated that well. It's not about you. The cashier doesn't know you. The cashier has no feelings about you. You were just standing in front of a cashier who maybe had a bad day. Maybe her husband is dying. Maybe her kid is a teenager and was insulting her on the way to school. Maybe she has financial problems. She's not reacting to you. She's reacting to something going on in her life. And so instead of feeling bad that she was grumpy to you, smile at her. Because I'll tell you, nobody can be mean to you if you're smiling at them. It just doesn't work. So just smile at her and it will change the dynamic. Now, let's say you're the parent of the teenager who was sassing you on the way to school in the morning. Well, again, that is not about you. Your teenager actually thinks you're the best parent in the whole world and wouldn't trade you with anybody, right? But your kid is just acting the way that teenagers act, and that's what teenagers do. So you can't take it personally. Like, I never took it personally when my kids acted that way. And so I felt like those teenage years were very easy. And I've passed this on to people. I remember even sitting on a chairlift one day, and I was talking to this woman about children, and I said this to her about don't take it personally when your kids, act up. And she said, "Oh my God, you just changed my life." And I talked to this other woman one time, and she called me a year later and she said, "I completely changed the way I interacted with my teenagers, and it was life changing. I have so much better relationship with them now." So if you go through life thinking, well, it's not about me, which means you are not going to be a narcissist. It's not about you. It's about that other person. Then what they do to you can't hurt you. And sometimes they really are trying to be jerks. Like, they're deliberately trying to be jerks. I remember one time I was in my early 30s and I had done this Wall Street thing, and I had helped a Wall Street firm take a company public, and then this company's stock, which had gone up, then went down. And I was visiting this investment bank one day and was standing in this big conference room with all of the traders. There were probably, I don't know, 24 of them or more in there. It was just this room filled with these big burly men, and I'm this petite little new mother from Connecticut standing in this New York office, like this little meek, mild person. And the head trader starts screaming at me because that stock went down. And he wasn't mad at me. He was actually mad at like his bosses at the company who had taken this company public. And I'm standing there and this man is screaming at me. And instead of feeling bad, I looked at him and I thought, well, you've got some problems, buddy. You're not screaming at me, really. And I just stood there and I kind of put up this invisible shield. Think of it as a big lucite shield. So there's this big shield in front of me, and he's shooting arrows at me, and the arrows are just hitting the shield and falling to the ground, harmless in front of me. And I just stood there, and I think he yelled at me for 15 or 20 minutes. And I just stood there thinking, you are a real jerk and you've got your own problems. And I am so glad I'm not you. You're going to go home and still be stuck with being you, which I know sounds a little snarky, but that's what I had to do to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important. I just go through life saying it's not about me. And that really, really helps. And it helps you to feel bolder and able to go out and do those new, exciting things that make your life richer. So that's some advice that I pass on to people about interacting with the outside world. And again, these are things that you can accomplish in 1 second just by deciding to think about something differently.
Do you have any advice for remembering to do this? Because it's one thing to decide in the moment, but the next time you go to a clerk and they're being mean or whatever, the next time we approach someone, and it could be someone in a person of authority like a boss or our parents or our kids, or our sister or brother, someone, and they're acting however they're acting, and all of a sudden we feel ourselves reacting, right? And instead of getting in that reactive mode, do you have any advice for how we can take a step back and go, "Oh, that's right. I'm getting in their shoes. I'm taking a deep breath and I'm not taking it personally because it's I just walked into them being upset about something."
I think you have to remind yourself before you go in, probably
Mm.
if you're going into a situation, you might already know something could happen. But one other thing that I have found that really works is this is going to sound so just like so self help, which is to smile at people. And I know this just sounds incredibly simple, but it really works. A smile is really a boomerang. If you throw a smile out there, it's almost always going to come back at you as a
Mhm.
boomerang. And it is really, really hard for people to continue to be mad at you if you're smiling. Now, I did not do that when the guy was yelling at me in the conference room. I might try that now and see if it worked, if I think of it. Um, but I have used a smile in other circumstances, and it's really, really worked. Well, for example, I was in New York City last year, and I was going to a hotel. So I'm in a car service car, and we're trying to turn right on West 44th Street to go to the hotel, and we're turning off 6th Avenue, and we can't turn onto 44th Street because somebody's had a little fender bender there, and the police have blocked the whole street because it's New York, and why would they make life easy? So, this fender bender was occupying like 2 lanes. They could have given us 1 lane to drive down, but no, they blocked the whole street. And so we just saw driver after driver in front of us be told, no, can't turn down this street. And there was no other way to get to this block. These are one-way streets. It's physically impossible to get there a different way. So my driver, was saying, well, we're not going to be able to turn. And I said, well, that's all right. Let's just pull up and talk to the cop. And I'll just tell him that I need to get these 2 suitcases out of the trunk and I'll wheel them down this block to the hotel. So we pull up by the cop and I roll down my window. I said to the driver, you don't say anything. I'll talk to him. So I put this big smile on my face and I say, hi, I know you're having a bad day. Listen, I have 2 suitcases in the trunk and I'm going to the hotel down the street. Can we just pull over so I can get the 2 suitcases out of the trunk and I'll wheel them down 44th Street? And he goes, lady, you have the nicest smile. Because you smiled at me, I'm going to let you drive down 44th Street. And I know this doesn't sound possible, right? But this really happened. So we had already like gone forward a little too much to make that right turn. So he stopped traffic on 6th Avenue so that we could back up. And then he moved the cones and we turned right onto 44th Street. And then I looked behind me and he put the cones back up behind us. And we drive down this totally empty block right to my hotel. And I get out right there with my suitcases. But that's the power of smiling to change the dynamic of a situation. It's really this incredible tool that you have that you can use. It's free, it's easy. You just have to start making a habit of using it.
I always think it's funny when people go into the situations combative, like they're gonna fight with the cop, and that's gonna make it be okay or that's going to create a good outcome. It's just so funny how people go into the situations thinking that if they put their armor on, they get all combative, that they'll somehow like triumph and win. There's that story of how do you get a coat off of a gentleman? The clouds and the sun are arguing who could manipulate this man to take his coat off, and so the cloud blows and then he rains and he does all this nasty weather on the guy, and of course the guy hugs his coat, and then the gentle sun comes out, it's his turn, and he just gently shines and smiles on the guy, and the guy gets hot and takes his coat off. And I know it's a really silly story, but it's like how are you going to get something done is by being nice, and then that person wants to help you. I had over the Christmas holidays, I had that say similar experience. My husband always goes to the UPS store to pick up our packages. Our business has a box at the UPS store, and he does not get along with or I should say the clerk does not get along with anyone. She's nasty and mean, and kind of, it almost seems as though she goes out of her way to like mess with people. He'll be standing there waiting for her to bring out the packages, and she'll like purposefully do something else, like to not help the people in line. It's so weird, and he's standing there getting more and more miffed about it. And then he comes back home and tells me like what a witch she was. And so I had a package to ship to Canada for Christmas, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to go in and do it because there's a long line, everyone's crazy, it's like a few days before the holidays. So I know we just want to get this package out, and I don't want to put my husband through that. So I go up and I started off with a smile, and I had the most amazing conversation with her. We just talked about, what's going on in the holiday season, and how, great it is. And it never went negative. And I went back out to the car and I said, is that the same woman that you talk about, that you tell me about? And he's like, because I thought maybe it was a different employee. And he's like, yeah, was it okay? And I was like, it was fabulous. It was fantastic. And she was not smiling at anyone else until I walked up to her, and I made it my intention my intention was to make it go as nice as possible and as kind as possible. And I think that she's genuinely unhappy in her life, and people pick up on that, and then they project it back onto her, and that just makes it even worse because she's mean to them, they're mean to her, everyone's kind of walks away unhappy. But I started the conversation with a smile and positivity, and kind of just trying to shine happiness and energy, happy energy at her. And it's like she kind of just relaxed. Actually, I started everything with a smile and a compliment. I complimented her, and it was a genuine compliment. But it all went well after that. And I thought,
Yeah.
man, it's so easy to give someone a smile, and I think it's really important to try and put ourselves in other people's shoes and go, what is this person's life like, right? Like, so that we can better understand where they're coming from. Not that we should ever justify like negative behavior, but then it's a part of what you said, which is not taking it personally, because if you can put yourself in their shoes, you realize it's not about you, right? It's
Hmm.
because we are all so obsessed with our own life. When do we ever make it about someone else? So when we're being negative at people, it's about our life, it's not about them. um
Well, I think that you also are making the point that you made before, which is that virtually everybody is a good person. This was
mhm
obviously a good person who was just going through a really tough time and maybe didn't have the stress management skills herself to compartmentalize and take all of the stress in her life and put it in a box while she was at work at the UPS store. And you penetrated through that difficult life that was creating this cloud over her. You found that nice person underneath that cloud.
I think as part of our own health, I think if we could make it be one of our goals as part of like uh the random acts of kindness in our life, to try and make smiles contagious, because when you smile, you start feeling good, and your body actually sends off all these wonderful neurochemicals that bathe every cell in your body to tell your body that you're not in a stressful situation, because you wouldn't smile and laugh when the bear's chasing you.
Hmm.
And so you're really triggering that part of the autonomic nervous system to heal the body. And if we can just make it be our mission to like I'm gonna make 10 people that weren't smiling smile today, you know, and if we could just play this game with ourselves, like how many people can I get to smile today? I think it would be a lot of fun to see, you know, maybe or like make this next month a month of smiles, and you know, try to get like 100 people to smile in the next month that weren't smiling, and make that be your goal when you walk up to the clerk, as opposed to walk up to the clerk getting like totally pissed that you've been in line for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is totally true. So I think that smiling at everybody, not taking it personally, not being judgmental, realizing that they have stuff going on in their own lives and that however they behave is not about you. These are all such easy things. These are literally things that can be done in 1 second. So this is a great
Wonderful.
way to start the new year.
Great. So the two books that everyone should get is Simply Happy and Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. Both are Chicken Soup for the Soul books. The links to them are going to be in the show notes of today's podcast, along with chickensoup.com, which is where they should go to sign up for your wonderful newsletter, where they are given stories every day for free. And they can also subscribe to your podcast, which I highly recommend because it is under 10 minutes and totally inspirational. A really great way to start the workday. Every morning they should tune in and listen to one of your episodes. You have a bunch of them because we talked about that you and I launched our podcast almost at the same time. And so you have quite a lineup of episodes that people can plug into, and I love that. And what else should they check out while on chickensoup.com?
Oh, I think they should check out Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, which is our business that does television shows, because there's some great TV shows, and we have clips from the shows. We have whole episodes available that they can watch. They can also see them on aplus.com because we rerun them on aplus.com. But I think that our shows are terrific. I would just poke around the website. There's so much cool stuff on there. There's so many things that will provide positive storytelling to you, whether it's in the form of reading something or viewing something. So I would just go and have a lot of fun there.
Cool. And then to wrap it up, I'd love to know, where do you see Chicken Soup for the Soul going in the next 10 years? Do you have a vision, or are there new projects on the horizon? Where do you see Chicken Soup for the Soul taking us?
Well, I think we're going to continue to cover all of the topics that are relevant to people today. The way that we put our books together, where we get stories from people, really allows us to keep our fingers on the pulse of society and to know what people are looking for. And so we keep putting out bestsellers on topics we've never done before, like Step Outside Your Comfort Zone, because it's what people want. And because our books are crowdsourced, we are, very, and then put together very quickly. They're very up to date, and they represent the viewpoint of lots of people all over the world, although primarily in the US and Canada. And I think you'll see, the print books continuing to come out with storytelling that is very relevant to our lives today. And then you're going to see more and more storytelling from us in the form of television and online video and movies. Whatever technologies there are, and I'm sure there will be new ones that develop over the next 10 years, I expect that we'll be there, still using the power of storytelling to improve people's lives.
Wonderful. Amy Newmark, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. I love what you and your husband do. I think you provide the most exceptional service to humanity. And I am thrilled to let the listeners know about everything you do in these two books, and also A plus. I'm the second we get off this interview, I am jumping from chickensoup.com. I'm clicking on, I see A plus is right there up in the tab, so I can click on it from your website, chickensoup.com. And I'm gonna go scroll through some inspiring stories, which that's gonna be my daily habit from now on, because I've been looking for a way to plug into inspiration. So now I know I can add chickensoup.com to my bookmarks on my tab, and I'll be able to check it out every day. And of course, subscribe to your email list so I can be plugged into more inspiration. Thank you for everything you do. And anytime you want to come back on the show to share more exciting information about any upcoming books, we'd love to have you back.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that you view the power of storytelling and our contribution to mental health as part of your overall focus on health.
I want to tell you about something I really believe in, which is nutrition. On my show, I get to talk to specialists throughout the entire health universe: chiropractors, herbalists, naturopaths, mental and emotional health coaches, and licensed healthcare providers. Amazing pieces to the puzzle we call health. All of these, of course, are supposing that you're actually eating. We, we eat to get all the raw building blocks our body requires. And that's where the problem starts. There's no more food in our food, right? I think everyone knows about the deficiencies in our soil that our food is grown in. Those deficiencies are passed down to us unless we can supplement. Which brings me to TakeYourSupplements.com. These people work with my go-to doctor, my go-to naturopath, for all my supplements. I've used them for 7 years. My family and I love them. They work. And if you'd love to address your nutrient deficiencies and figure out what supplements are right for you, then you definitely want to go to TakeYourSupplements.com. You put in your information, and within 24 hours, one of their health coaches contact you, and for free, will talk with you and figure out exactly what supplements are best for you, the highest quality for the lowest price that fit into your budget and address your nutrient needs. They're amazing coaches. I've known them for years. I love them. They're wonderful people. They have a huge heart, and they really want to help you to dial in your supplements and your diet and your lifestyle to achieve your health goals. So go to TakeYourSupplements.com and put in your information now. That's TakeYourSupplements.com. You will be very happy you did.